You're listening to A State of the Union, estate planning made simple. Here's your host, Brad Wiewel, from the Wiewel Law Firm in Austin, Texas.
Hi, this is Brad Wiewel, and this is the Estate of the Union, and I am here with Ann Lumley. And Ann is one of the lawyers at Texas Trust Law. We have a new name for our law firm. It is now Texas Trust Law. We've been the Wiewel Law Firm for decades, and the state of Texas, the state bar, has decided that we can use a trade name, so we're going to use a trade name, which is Texas Trust Law. We've had that on our email for years. That's our website, so you'll see more of Texas Trust Law as you go through in the future. But we have Ann Lumley.
Good morning.
Good morning. And Ann is our Director of Estate Administration, and Ann is wonderful in many respects, but she's especially wonderful in helping our clients who've lost loved ones. And this is a very delicate, sometimes frustrating, and sometimes complex and scary time for many, many people. And if you haven't been through it, you won't look forward to it. When you're going through it, Ann and her team can really help you get through it smoothly and with a minimum amount of stress, which is what anybody would want in that time. But today we're not going to talk about hardcore, what happens when I die stuff. We can do that again. We did it recently, and we'll circle back around to that, I'm sure. Today we are going to start a new little segment of the Estate of the Union, and we are going to talk about dumb things people do. And for our first installment of dumb things people do, we're going to talk about people that died without wills, died without trust, died without any really thing to pass on their assets to their loved ones, and people who have screwed this up royally, ladies and gentlemen. And the theme here would be, don't let this happen to you, because it happened to a lot of famous people. And don't die dumb. Maybe that's a nice little thing. Don't die dumb. So Ann, I'm going to ask you, you see things come in, you see people that kind of drop the ball. What, in your opinion, is the reason why people die without a plan?
Well, I think mainly people don't like to think about dying, and they don't like to think about their own mortality. And I also think people get busy and they just put it off. I know I'm guilty. This is my job. This is my profession. I help people with it every day. I see mistakes happen every day. And I do have a plan in effect, but I've been here about 9 years.
Right.
And I have the opportunity to have a much better plan. I have a new child since I've had my will done. It works, but it could be much more efficient. But I work here, and then I go home, and I'm mom, and I take care of things. And I think a lot of people just get busy, and they have the intention of doing it, and they just don't get to it. Or else, like I said, they don't want to think about it, because it's hard. It's a hard subject to think about.
It's a hard subject to think about. And one thing that we've discovered, and in our law firm, is that we don't have lines outside our door.
No?
No. You will never have to take a number out of a little thing and wait for somebody to wait on you here, because people don't look forward to coming in. They don't wake up that morning and go, hey, I
Let's
get to
get
see
a
a lawyer.
will.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's get a will. Let's go see a lawyer, right? Hey, people love lawyers, don't they?
Yes, people don't like lawyers until they need a lawyer.
That's an excellent point. And my experience with people is that when something really happens, and say it's something, they get a lawsuit or they've been wronged, they will cuss and cuss and cuss lawyers until that point, and then they want the biggest, baddest SOB that you could find to defend me or prosecute this lawsuit. It's a complete, change of mindset for sure, on a dime.
Well, I like to think primarily what we do is preventative law. So if we do our job correctly, we make the legal process more smooth for people. So I try to remind people of that when they give me a hard time for being an attorney.
Yeah, well, we're here to, you're right, preventative is a really good way to say this. We don't do any litigation, the Wiewel Law Firm, Texas Trust Law. We just do planning, and we do, again, probate and help people when something has happened to a loved one. I've got an interesting sentence. This is something I pulled off the internet. That according to Virtual Lawyer, which I suppose is a website, I'm not familiar with it, but according to Virtual Lawyer, 32% of Americans would rather do their taxes, get a root canal, give up sex for a month, than create or update their will.
No, it's not that bad.
You're not quite that bad. But 32% of people would rather, a root canal, than update their will or do a new will. That says a lot.
It does. I'm just saying the process really isn't that bad, people.
Yeah, we're pretty friendly folk here too, and we try to lower the barrier to come in because this is, again, kind of a scary time. Just to create a will or a trust is frustrating. But we've also found that people kind of have their own little mental checklists, and they want to get things done. I want to finally paint this room. I want to finally clean up my closet. I want to finally get my oil changed. I want to finally do this or that. And a lot of people have this thing, I want to finally get a will done. And they come in, and we're happy to help them. But boy, that's a huge hurdle to get over. And then if you're married, you have to get your spouse to be a part of this too. And
that can be a challenge. I cannot confirm nor deny. So I like to tell people that, I have a different perspective because I primarily focus on administering estates.
Right.
And I get what I get. I get where the people left things off. And so I see people that have done efficient plans, and I've seen the opposite. So when I do help people with wills, I let them know that you really are you're making it much easier for your family. It's a blessing that you're giving your family to go ahead and think about it now and get things in order, because when you pass, they're grieving, and the last thing they want to do is deal with any kind of legal action, but it can be much more complicated, and more stressful.
And more expensive.
And it doesn't have to be.
Right. Anger is one of the phases of grief, and I think we all kind of visualize that at our funeral, and certainly for about probably 10 years after our funeral, at the mention of our name, people will break down weeping and miss us so bad. And I don't think that's always our experience, is it, Ann?
Not always, no.
Not always, no. And especially if somebody has dropped the ball and didn't get it done. Now, Ann, you've met people that have come in and the deceased died without a plan. And the deceased may have had terminal cancer and known that they're going to die. Why do you think people don't plan even in that situation?
I think they're probably preoccupied with what's happening day to day, perhaps.
Okay.
And maybe they think that it buys them some time by not finishing the plan.
Okay.
Like maybe if they get the plan in order, it's okay to go, and maybe
they don't want to hold. They want to hold on.
Subconsciously, I don't know. I couldn't totally answer that, but I've seen that happen a lot. But I've also seen some that have chosen to go ahead and have something in order, and we were able to get it in just in time, and it just makes a difference.
Yeah, we've actually gone to people's houses, and we've gone to a hospital or two just to get this thing done at the last minute. But don't wait till the last minute, because you can't do all the planning. You can do some, but it's very difficult to cover all the bases if you wait till the last minute. I also think, Ann, and this may sound, again, unusual, but I think there's some truth to it. There's a superstition about doing a will, and some people think if I do a will, that means I'm going to die. That's
what I was trying to get out, but you're better at that. Yes.
Well, and again, I'm on my deathbed. If I do it, I want to live, and everybody's. And I think sometimes people, it might be negative, honey. Let's do a will. Well, did you give up hope for me?
Right.
Have you talked to the doctor? They said something that you're not sharing with me. But I have news for everybody here, and this is not news for you, Ann, but everybody's going to die.
Getting closer to it every day.
I don't even go there. I'm a young 68 years old. I tell people I'm in my late, mid-60s.
Well, I'll tell you, I look at death certificates every day,
Right.
and it's true, you never know. It comes at all ages, all times, in all different ways. So it's better to be prepared. It's
Right.
going to happen one way or the other. You might as well put the effort into it ahead of time to save your family some struggles on the other
More
side.
grief.
I was going to say grief, but
on
they're already
grief.
grieving, but yes.
Grief on grief on grief on grief, right?
Right.
Okay, so let's focus on this. I've got a list of famous people who died without a will, and this is like an amazing list, and this is a short list, or excuse me, a partial list of the people, and if you're ready, Steve McNair, who was a very famous football player for about a decade, played for many teams, died without a will. He'd given his mother a home that she was living in. Before he died, gave her this home, but she got evicted from the home that her own son gave her because she didn't have the papers to show the gift. She'd moved in and, Mom, this is your home. Didn't have the papers to show that this was her house. And he didn't have a will giving it to her at his death. She had nothing. She got evicted from the house her famous football player son gave her because he didn't do it right.
I see that a lot.
Tell me about that.
Dad told us, Dad said, this is what he wanted. That very well may be true, but unless there's, with a house, unless there's a deed or a will or some sort of disposition to show that, it doesn't matter because Texas doesn't recognize oral wills.
Right.
It has to be in writing, and the conveyance has to be done according to law.
Right, and we used to have oral wills, which was interesting. So we used to have something called a nuncupative will, an oral will, and had to be on your deathbed. You could lean up on your elbow and say, okay, you get this and you get that and you get this other. If you had 3 witnesses or something who heard you, that would work. But
There's a limit to the amount you could give.
And there
that way
was, that's
as
right,
well.
that's
I don't
right.
even think you could give real property, but
But
yes.
they have taken that out of the law, so that doesn't work anymore. I've talked to people who say, well, I think what I'm going to do is, kind of what we're doing here, I'm going to videotape myself. I'm going to do a videotape and tell my family.
We see it all the time on TV and in the movies. You're going to play the video, or there's going to be a reading of the will.
Right.
There's no reading of the will.
And don't break my heart on that. Come on,
I
Ann.
mean, if you really want me to. But
Oh, right, but that's interesting, ladies and gentlemen. So Hollywood has this thing where the family gathers together and they sit down with the state attorney, and the state attorney gets out the will, and this is the last will of your father, your mother, your sister, your brother, and let's read it, and reads it. That doesn't happen.
I think we might need security at our law firm if we did that as a routine.
Yeah, I would be concerned that there's a kid in the back who probably thinks he's going to get disinherited, and in fact is disinherited, and decides to take out the lawyer, right?
Yeah.
It has happened. It has happened.
We don't want that.
No, we don't want that. So what typically does happen? The family come in, who comes in?
For an initial appointment, at our firm, we represent the person that's named as the executor in the will, or a trustee that's going to step up in line to serve after the person's passed away. We represent the fiduciary. So we want to talk to the person that has authority to act on behalf of the estate. And we'll have an initial meeting to kind of look and see the fact pattern for that particular estate, because every estate's different. Everybody's got different planning in order or not in order. Everybody's got a different family structure. So we spend about 2 hours in our first meeting. Sometimes it doesn't take that long, but there's a lot to go over. And I like to look at the fact pattern and figure out what probate tools or estate planning tools, because you don't always necessarily need a probate. But I like to see what tools are available, and we talk about the pros and cons of each tool, but ultimately it will be up to that representative as to what path they choose,
Okay, yeah.
depending on what's available to them.
Sure. So lots of different things. If you do it, you get to pick a path. If you don't do it, then the state of Texas or the state of Montana or the state of Idaho or Connecticut has a plan for you. Each state each state legislature has written kind of the default will. Is that a good way to say it?
Right, the intestacy law, and it varies from state to state, and that's probably one of the hardest things I have to tell people. And it comes a lot with blended families and a married couple that may have been married for 30-something years or more, but they got married and there were prior children from the person that passed away, and property just doesn't pass automatically the way you think it might. And so the most common thing is buying a house together. It's a community property house. Texas law, if both spouses are the parent of the child, then the law assumes the second spouse will take care of the child after they pass away, he or she passes away.
So the surviving spouse gets pretty much
So
all
yes,
the
so
community
the
property.
community property will pass to a surviving spouse if the kids are of the same marriage. But if there's a child from a prior marriage, Texas law isn't going to count on the step parent providing for the deceased child. So the surviving spouse will keep their half interest in the community property, but the deceased share will get split between all of his or her kids.
So this is a really, really important thing. In blended families, if the deceased had a child from a prior, I'll say relationship, maybe not a marriage, but a prior
Sure.
relationship, and that person dies, then that person's half of the community property doesn't go to the weeping surviving spouse, it goes to that person's children. Maybe there's a child of the current marriage, maybe there's a child from a prior relationship, doesn't matter, it all goes to those children, and the weeping widow in our office only gets half of the house and half of the accounts and half of the cars. That's hard.
They can still live in their house because
Right.
of the probate homestead rule, but it makes for complicated issues with taxes and mortgage payments and things like that.
Mhm. And maybe if it was a minor child from a prior relationship, you get to deal with the other parent of that child. And that's
Sure.
not always, or an adult stepchild, and those aren't always great relationships. So again, folks, you don't have to go through any of this stuff. You just have to plan. And even though you may rather do your taxes, even though you may rather have a root canal, even though you may rather go a month without sex, instead of doing this, you need to do this. All right, but let's go back. I started this little topic and I haven't
You're
returned
right.
to it yet. Famous people who died without a will or any estate planning. We're going to start with the most famous one of all, probably Abraham Lincoln. And Abraham Lincoln was not only president, but he was a lawyer. And it's shocking to me that Abraham Lincoln died without a will. Great man in many, many respects, but again, dropped the ball at the goal line. And in my experience, and I think lawyers are the worst at doing their own estate plans.
I already confessed.
So they are, and I don't know how many lawyers listen, if any lawyers are listening, but lawyers, for one thing, have sometimes a high respect for themselves, and I think they kind of think, well, I'll just print one out right before I take my last breath, or lawyers have learned in law school that in Texas, but not every state, but in Texas, handwritten wills can be done. I'll scratch out something right as that second wave of my massive heart attack hits, or right before I die at the hospice from this cancer. Lawyers are the worst. So lawyers out there, you need to do this too. So we had Abraham Lincoln.
Can I put in 2 cents to the lawyers too?
Feel free to put in 5 cents.
See a estate planning attorney, even if you are an attorney. I've probated wills drafted by other attorneys that really could have been easier. They were missing some magic words or some powers of the executor that you don't want to skimp on. What do you say? If you're having heart surgery, you don't just want any old doctor
Right.
to do that. And it's the same thing with estate planning. There's some good tools out there that you just need to know about, and just because you went to law school, I certainly wouldn't go do a criminal case.
Right. And that's, again, for a general audience too. So when you're gonna go do this, go to a specialist, go to somebody who does this all the time, because there's a lot of good lawyers out there that are good in many, many things, but the lawyer who did your divorce may not be the right lawyer to do your will, or the lawyer that got your kid out of the DWI again may not be the right lawyer to do your will. They may have something that they've accumulated over the course of time. The law changes all the time. And frankly, it may be more expensive to go to a specialist, but I did have heart surgery at one point, and I've had it frankly twice. And one was a bypass and one was an ablation. And it was nice to know that the doctor that did that just did that. The heart surgeon just did heart surgery. The doctor that did ablations just does ablations. And you know, when I was put under, it was at least some comfort to me and my wife that I was in the best hands possible, not just somebody who, a general practitioner, a really good family medicine doctor, but he doesn't do open heart surgery. So
I'm gonna plug in at this point too, also the do-it-yourself software, because there's a lot of software out there. In fact, in my own junk mail here at the Wiewel Law Firm, now Texas Trust Law.
Very good.
I got someone soliciting saying, put this link on your website, and you could click this link, and it was about doing a quick online will. And I'm like, why would you ever solicit an estate planning attorney to put that? Because I can just tell you, I've seen so many of those, and they're not good. And people have forgotten to switch the names for a husband and wife, and people have tried to use their neighbor's will and copied it, and then they left the same executor that their neighbor had, and then I'm like, who's Bob? And they're like, we don't know who Bob is, but Bob has to decline to serve or be dead, and we have to prove it in order for the next person to go. So there's just a lot of little things that might not seem big to you when you're doing it, but really make a huge difference in the administration process and the cost of the administration process. And so pay a little more up front to pay less at the end.
And this is your life's work. This is everything you've accumulated over however many years you've been alive. And you know, to try to do it for $35 or $50 or whatever is really short-sighted. But
I'm sorry. I said that's what really surprised me when I was reading these articles about all the celebrities, and you hear about them like Prince. You know, he was
Prince
so
died
wealthy,
without a will, right?
and he didn't have a will. And you know, these people have to be surrounded by all kinds of advisors.
Sure.
You would think somebody would help with that, but the huge issue with him was he owned the rights to his intellectual property, and then that had to be valued. And then there's like just random heirs that are getting, you know, this intellectual property shares of this, and how do you divide that up? And it's just a huge mess that was surprising to me. I mean, it affects non-celebrities in the same way, but like with these people, they have so much wealth and are surrounded by people that advise them. Reading some of these cases, it just boggles me. And then having Gandolfini, I'm sorry, I was not a Sopranos
yes,
person,
a Sopranos star, right.
But I was reading about him as well, and some of his gifting choices caused some huge estate tax consequences that I'm sure he probably didn't intend.
And he went to a lawyer and got a will, but the lawyer who did his will wasn't an estate planning lawyer and did not give him good advice, and really tens of millions of dollars in unnecessary taxes because he went to the wrong kind of lawyer. More famous people who died without wills. How about Pablo Picasso? How about Prince? You mentioned Prince. Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson's estate is still careening around. James Brown.
Michael Jackson, before you went to James Brown,
sure, go right
Michael
ahead.
Jackson created a trust but failed to fund the trust. And that's something that I see people make that mistake too. You have to put the assets into the trust, and that's something we assist. When we do trust, we make sure we get the real property into the trust and give very detailed checklists and instructions on how to make sure your trust is funded. Because if you have a fully funded trust, you can avoid court altogether and do an administration completely privately in an office and not have to deal with anything that's in the public record.
Going to court, see the judge, and that's maybe another thing too. As lawyers, we see judges, and we've been to the courthouse, and it's routine for us. It's not routine for you. Most people have never been to court. They've never seen a judge. These are very low impact hearings. The judge is very nice. He understands what's going on. You won't be put on a witness stand and somebody wags their finger at you and calls you a liar. It's nothing like that, but it is going to court, and it is seeing the judge, and that is intimidating too, and stressful too, and expensive too. Okay, so.
And I talk you through all of that ahead of time.
Good.
So I always tell people, first when people come in, I know you don't want to see me. Something bad has happened if you're coming to see me, and I understand that. And like we talked about before, I do this every day, and I deal with this every day, but we try to be very mindful and respectful of the fact that the people we work with don't do this every day. And we try really hard to be human beings, and not just your attorney, but a human being that is trying to help you get through this time. We try to take as much of the burden of this process off our clients' shoulders, so that they can focus on grieving in their family and make a decision here and there, sign here and there.
Sure, that's right.
But we get you through the process, and we only do uncontested probate. So when we do go to court, like you said, it's just the same 10 to 12 questions. We prep you for it ahead of time. We're there uncontested. The judge knows you lost someone. They're kind.
And you can bring a friend with you too.
Yes,
or a family member. Right.
We just get the information on the record so you can get the paperwork to do what we need to do to get everything where it's supposed to go.
Okay, that's great, and that's what makes Ann so valuable here at Texas Trust Law. More famous people, ready for a few more famous people who died without a will. Frederick Vanderbilt of Vanderbilt University is the railroad magnate. John D. Rockefeller, the richest man in the world back around 1900. J.P. Morgan, now there's a guy, okay, we all go to Chase Bank maybe, or Chase Bank, J.P. Morgan Chase. He was, after John D. Rockefeller, Rockefeller died, J.P. Morgan was probably the richest man in the world, and he died without a will. President Franklin Roosevelt, president for 12 plus years, wealthy family, saved us from the Depression, saved us from World War II, died without a will, and good old, who's that in?
The king, Elvis Presley.
Elvis Presley, bless his heart, died without a will too, and paid ginormous estate taxes because of his failure to plan too, and that affected, of course, his wife, his daughter, and many other people too. And so, we're not famous, and you're probably not famous, the folks that are listening and watching us right now, but these famous people, again, this is a segment on dumb things people do, were brilliant people in so many respects. Pablo Picasso died without a will. Brilliant, famous, wealthy, as Ed said, surrounded by people who should have been telling them, and probably did. Aretha Franklin died without a will too, probably told them time and time again, let's get this done, and they didn't do it for whatever psychological reason, timing reason, financial reason. I doubt it was the money that dissuaded them, but good night.
Well, even people that have a lot of money often have a lot of money because they're very frugal. And so they don't often want to spend, I've had people question, people that you wouldn't think would question a fee will question a fee, as opposed to some people that you would think would question a fee, and they don't. So that's just something I've noticed. Sometimes people have a lot of money for a reason, and
that's really,
and they
really
might not see the importance of what you're providing, but I'm here to tell you it's important. And if it doesn't, like I say, you either pay up front to have some good planning, or you could pay a lot. And then some of these people, when they have this kind of wealth, a considerable amount more, and penalties and different things for not making good choices.
I cannot imagine how much Prince's estate's going to pay, or Michael Jackson's estate's going to pay for the drop balls along the way, and again, just the lack of foresight, and the lack of, another word, maybe discipline, personal self-discipline, to take care of their family, because you leave people bereft and you leave this big mess. And frankly, lawyers can benefit from not planning, because there's more work to be done when somebody dies, and frankly, more work means more attorney's fees too.
And think about all the different family members that are going to share in an interest of this huge estate, having to make cooperative decisions regarding these song rights and things like that. Like, it's just so much more complicated than it needed to be.
Now, we get clients in all the time with siblings and adult children. How do the adult kids get along? Well, pretty well. Oh, pretty well. Okay, well, not always, and of course not always. We're people. And then you put them in this thing, we have to deal with money together, and a lot of money sometimes together, and land together, and businesses together, and it's a free fall into a slime pit. That's the easiest way to say it. And I think we're out of time. It's great seeing you. Thanks for coming. We'll have Ann back again for who knows how many times, but this segment again, we are focusing on dumb things people do. And we'll be back because there'll be
plenty of those
a
stories.
lot more things to talk about, folks. And I would just caution you, you don't want to have your situation show up on our show. So get this planning done. You can call Texas Trust Law. You can go online at texastrustlaw.com. We really try to, again, take the human perspective here. We frankly focus on godly things, and we want to try to honor God, and we want to try to honor you and honor your family, and frankly honor each other. We have a great team here, and we like each other a lot. So feel free to let us know if we can help you at texastrustlaw.com or 512-480-8828. If you need a lawyer in another part of the country, let us know that too. We can help you with that as well. Thanks again.